Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hello and welcome to another Thursday edition of Gaelic Lives. We are bang in the middle of club action again. The county season has been and gone, and we're looking ahead to the championship all the way to our all-star scheme at the end of March next year. So before that, we're looking backwards. We're looking towards Mullaghbawn's 1995 journey, and I'm joined, thankfully, here this morning by Peter McDonnell, who was at the helm back in the day, and they're getting ready for an anniversary later on this year. Peter, it's probably, you probably can't believe that that's the length of time it was, 1985, that we're back looking at it.
It's a strange phenomenon, one which I could never understand my parents speaking about events that were 25, 30, 40 years ago, and making the statement, time flies. That was something as a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old I failed to grasp, but I can tell you that at this point in life, I have grasped it and I'm shocked by it. So that's where we are now.
Peter, you've been involved in a lot of football. You're obviously managing Armagh and the Ulster title, and you know, I chatted to you before, you're involved with Armagh under 20s at a stage as well. But how often do you think about the Mullaghbawn journey? Because like it's a major one. Is it something that comes into your head often?
Well, I would say it does, because I would meet many of the players, not enough of them now, but I would meet the players of that panel frequently. I have taught many of their kids. You know, that moving on sort of has happened unknown to us, but it will be significant, because it wasn't the culmination of a year's training. It wasn't the culmination of a year's coaching. It was part of a journey that began long before that. And I could nearly transport you back. I think it would be valid to recount the experience of the centenary year of the GAA. In 1984, there was a special sort of championship competition organised within our own county, and we were playing in Division 4 at the time, and it was an open championship for every club. It wasn't graded in any shape or form, and like every other club team, there was a sprinkling of players across sort of different generations, from early 30s to mid-teens, and in some instances maybe below mid-teens. But we did well in that competition. We beat Collaville, who were in Division 2 at the time. We beat Wolfe Tones, who were in Division 1. And a very young Neil Smith pointed a 45 or a 50, I think it was referred to at that time, in the last minute of the game to win it by a point. But nonetheless, what we did was we rubbed shoulders with the higher grade of teams within the county, and weren't found wanting until the semi-final stage, where Mahary beat us. But for us to get to the semi-final of that competition as a junior side had an impact on the psychology, I suppose, of the younger players, and I'd include myself in that. And that stayed with us. Now, we had a lot of work to do. There was a long road ahead of us. Significant for our team in 95 was that in 85, the year following that, I think our minors won the county championship. So that was 86, minors won 86, and we won the junior championship. And we were promoted into the intermediate grade. Now, it wasn't all plain sailing. Like, we struggled to get out of Division 4, took us a couple of years. We struggled to get out of Division 3. I think we missed promotion by a point or two, maybe the next year. And then getting into Division 2, we were growing as a team. Because I have to stress, the youth were young. Those lads made their senior debuts at 14. And in one instance that I'm aware of, I played my first senior match for Malaban before I had turned 14. And they were growing physically and emotionally and gaining experience. Now, the sprinkling of maturity within the team was always a help and always badly needed. But it took us until 1993 then. No, 92 to win the intermediate. That was a huge thing for Mullaghbawn. Mullaghbawn had played in numerous intermediate finals and had been beaten in them all. And when I say numerous, I think now I've heard some of the older members of the club talk about maybe a dozen finals, including a replay, as one man put it. But that was a huge thing, and you know, walking away with the underage, there was a man called Charlie Grant, had a huge impact on many of those youngsters. Charlie would have had the group of youngsters behind me growing up, so I never actually played under Charlie. Then Joe McNulty, Justin, and his dad had great success with St Paul's High School. They won an All-Ireland, and Joe was in our club. Joe was a tremendous footballer for Armagh for years. Put a bit of structure and organisation on everything, and it took us to the intermediate. I want to say at this stage as well, like prior to Joe, we had what I thought was a very astute manager in Father Jared McAleer, who was curate in our parish during the early 80s. And he was a great believer in developing basic skills. So that was the sort of the history of it that was significant to me. Now, there was other things that all contributed to this that came. The start of it was training on a Sunday morning for youngsters. It's a commonplace all over the country now, but not at that time round here. And Eamon Murphy and a man called Joe Daly started that. And sure, listen, children came from all over the parish just to get a bag of crisps and a bottle of mineral after training. It was such a treat. But that would have started off that group of youngsters that I was with, and then it's going on and growing. First year then, in 93, getting to the senior championship, that was a mighty, mighty thing. I had never, in my lifetime, any recollection of being next to near senior football. But we got to the semi-final, and Gaelic beat us. Narrowly enough, but went on to win the county championship, so they did. The following year, 94, was my first year then as manager. I want to stress at this point, this wasn't something that I was looking for. I was very glad to be a player, liked being a player, and I had been sort of cornered at a players' meeting by the players and couple of committee members, when we were brainstorming for a manager, they asked for me, strangely enough, and they wanted me to be player manager, but that wasn't a starter. I didn't think that was a good idea at all. So, with great reluctance and no small degree of disappointment, I became manager in '94.
So you essentially retired then? You had to retire yourself?
They retired me, yes.
Well, it was an interesting choice of word, cornered. I like the way you use that word. I can imagine, I can picture it, where we need a man here. You're our man.
Well, I had been taking Mullaghbawn under 21s prior to that. Myself and Neil Smith and Colin McParland, and we had got to 3 county championships and we won 2 of them. So I suppose being, as I said, I used the word cornered, I could say corralled either, but I suppose, that's probably the reason why they were looking for me to succeed Joe.
And why did you feel that a player manager wasn't an option? Was that a personal thing, or was it just time, or? Because it's not that, like, I know Dungiven won the Ulster in '97 and Eugene Kelly was player manager. It comes into my head. He lives close to me here, but why did you feel? Was it just the fact of you wanted separation, or?
There are a number of reasons. There were practical considerations. I had got married in 1993. We were trying to get a house sorted out. I was secretary of the club. I was managing the under-20s. Myself and Neil Smith had always been coaching at the team, training the team, regardless of who the management were from the mid-80s, basically from we were at college. Like between Neil and myself and Aidan Smith as well, we were captaining that senior team from we were 18-year-olds. And sort of it would be rotated year about. I had been involved in all of that. I worked in the social club 2 nights a week, and I was taking a transfer class in primary school. My wife was convinced that football wasn't for me. She had aspirations of me taking up golf and settling down, which failed to materialise. but that's why I was reluctant. But purely from a sporting end of things, I would have had to do a lot of training for athletics. It's very, very intense. Start off early in the morning prior to school. Then there was about 40 minutes at lunchtime. And then I had an hour and a half to 2 hours every evening after school. And then every Saturday was Mary Peters track. And I couldn't work if there were distractions. I had to be single-minded. And for me to be a player manager was a dilution of both roles. Either I was a player and go 100% at it, or I was going to be a manager and go 100% at it. So there was that wasn't a consideration whatsoever. People are built in different ways. And maybe when somebody eventually diagnoses me for something, they may find that I'm on the spectrum somewhere. But I had to stay focused on one thing, and that was managing the team.
You said something there, Peter, about the fact that you obviously, that centenary competition sort of lit a fire, that you had talent, and as you say, you were mixing with the big dogs. But the 12, was it something like 12 intermediate finals losing? I know you can't pinpoint it all, but was it a belief thing that you had to change as well, or was there just luck, or was the landscape in South Armagh and Armagh just so competitive at that time because something changed, that because you just went on then to win the biggest prize?
Well, and I'm speaking personally here on this, my opinion was coloured by hurtful experiences. Um, I can't recall too often us going into championship encounters at any of the grades, junior or intermediate. Well, certainly at senior, I'll exclude that for the moment. We were always favourites. We were always expected to be the winners, and that didn't materialise. There was a lot of blood and sweat and hard graft put into championship campaigns, and we did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And time again, there was the inquest as to what went wrong. And of course, among a player group, there'd be people talking about this thing and that training method as opposed to another, that manager as opposed to another, that coach as opposed to another. And basically, it all amounted to a pile of nothing because we hadn't got over the hurdle. And you can spend a long time looking out and learning nothing. And I think it was getting to the point where that athletic experience, that looking in and looking hard at yourself and measuring yourself, and let's say have a very clearly focused training to address the needs that needed to be addressed instead of a sort of generic approach to the whole thing. So that was significant, getting to that mindset.
And the final point before we move into part 2 of the podcast, Peter, what sort of a place is Mullaghbawn to some listeners who aren't actually from it? Is it just a rural area that's fanatical about GA? I remember watching that documentary More Than a Game where you were talking about it, and it was the passion in your voice when you're talking about it. Is it just like any other location, or what's it like? What was it like growing up in Mullaghbawn and being involved?
Well, Mullaghbawn was a wonderful place to grow up in. In fact, like most of South Armagh, growing up at a time that was maybe looked upon as being back now has been a difficult time. But it was a wonderful place. It's a close-knit community. Everything centres around the village, the school and the football club. Happy, absolutely. Wonderful friends, great neighbours. That's the sort of experience we had. But our experience is like most rural places, and I suppose our experience is the same as every other club, that you enjoy more years of mediocrity than you do of actual success. But there was talent there, there was players maturing, and we felt that it was time to step up to the mark. I had and always have had an absolute abhorrence to bunting and flags and all of that stuff. And I can understand why a community wants to put their arms around you and show how much they love you and prepare you for a final or one thing or another. I found that as a distraction. I found that a distraction for myself, and I found it a distraction for the players. I can recall pulling the players in before we played in a championship match, an intermediate final against Drummond, and there was a giddiness about the panel. And I remember going round the circle, and I was captain of the team at the time, and I asked certain fellas, what are you going to do on Sunday? What are you going to score? Well, I can tell you before I got to half a dozen players, we must have scored maybe 440. And I was absolutely incensed that people's heads were so far removed from what it was that they had to deal with. And I think that's a common enough thing that you find. But certainly we had to take steps to make sure that people were grounded, had their head in the here and now, and had very clear focus on what it was that they were to do. And I suppose that there encapsulates the approach that we then adopted under myself and Aidan Smith and Noel Murphy.
So that's the scene set in part one, folks. We'll hear a word from our sponsors, Hastings Hotels, and then we'll be back in part two, where we'll try and chart Mullaghbawn's senior journey.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
So, Peter, you lost to the Clans in the 93 semi-final. Am I right here? You took over as manager in 94 and you lost to them in the final. Is that correct? That was your first season?
Yeah.
And how did you go from being corralled to actually being the manager? Was that I'm in the zone here, I'm taking everything at full pelt? Did you just pour yourself into it with everything you had? And the group as well, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But at this point, we had an attentive audience. We had lads who had bought into this sort of approach. As I said, we'd already gone to 3 county under 21 finals. Number of lads going to college increased.
Mm-hmm.
That increased quite dramatically from what it was in the early 80s to what it was in the early 90s. I would have driven the club minibus down to Queen's and collected lads and took them back up to Malaban and trained them, and we took them back down. And myself and another couple of the senior players, we paid for them to have a bite to eat, and we did that. And that sort of thing, I suppose, earned respect. They saw how much we were invested in those players. They got on that bus because it was so important that Malaban be the most desirable football place those players could go to. And we had to compete with college teams then and county teams. And we wanted to create something where our players wanted to be with us more than anybody else. And that was part of the whole thing. It underpinned everything that we did. But by God, did we not train hard? But that's what everybody says that wins something. We trained hard and we kept it very, very basic. We understood that we couldn't compete against people unless we could control our own game, unless we could control our own passes, unless we owned our own work rate, which you hear of now a lot. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very basic, and we were stepping into the unknown. Like, this was serious stuff now. We should have won the 1994 final. In terms of possession, we absolutely dominated Tanagir. I didn't show the video of that game until the week before we played them the first round of the championship the next year. And I remember the reaction. And it was amazing what people had carried in their heads over those number of months until we played them again, which was so far off the mark. And when we showed the video that night, the response was shock. I remember one player standing up and said, for frick's sake, how did we let that there happen? Missed 20-meter freeze and all of that. Now, as I said, our game was a basic game, but there was a lot of rehearsal, a lot of drills, kick passing, I remember Kieran McGeeney, after us doing chip passing drill for about 20 minutes, was demanding more and more and more. And we chip passed in a very simple star thing for 40 minutes until we didn't have drops. And that's the level of intensity we had. We have a mountain beside us called Slieve Gullion, and it's quite imposing. And you can see it clearly if you're travelling via motorway from Belfast to Dublin. Our side of the parish has a very steep side of the mountain, and we went up there and went up there. My rucksack was filled with toiletries, towels and toilet roll, and other rucksacks were filled with water, and we used every resource we had because people had lost control of both ends of their bodies at times going up that mountain. We had to train harder than anybody else. There was an athletics thing behind this as well. There was personal experience of stuff. And I had never seen footballers train as hard as some lads that I had experienced in athletics. We got to the top of that mountain, and it took us till mid-August to do so. It was almost 40 runs. It was 38 runs. And it was tough. But when we got to the top of that mountain and looked, it's the strange thing about that place. When you look from the top of there, you can see as far as Wicklow. You can see as into Cavan and beyond Latin. You can see Latney and the Sperrin Mountains, and you can see Belfast. And I suppose psychological stuff. But we were determined that as far as we could see, nobody was going to beat us. When we were sitting down, just prior to all of this, the management had agreed. When one of them asked, well, what are we aiming for? We had said we were aiming to win Ulster. I know that sounds very sort of colourful now, but in Larkin's pub in Fork Hill, the management team sat down and was asked, what are we going for? I said, we're going to win Ulster. That was because we had one of the best goalkeepers in the country, Brenton Tierney, with Neil Smith. Neil Smith was a Rolls Royce. We had a young Kieran McGeeney. And we had another gentleman called McGeeney, Patrick McGeeney, that would go through a wall. He played in the full forward line for us. And we had other fellas there, Colin McParland, our fullback, Cody Bourne. I could go through all of those lads. We actually had a team that was made of every single one of them, I think, had some county experience. And I had gone religiously to Ulster Club finals and Ulster Club matches. And I'm looking at teams and I'm seeing them doing stuff and not doing stuff. I thought, we can match that. We can match that. So training to win Armagh was a huge thing. It was a huge weight to try and remove from our shoulders, but the ambition was to go further.
You touched on a couple of things there about taking the bus to college, and obviously you had players that played Sigerson football against the best of Ulster and would have played McCrory and all that type of thing, but like to have somebody like Kieran McGeeney in the middle of that, like you had loads of leaders, like you had 3 McNultys, you know, you had your own family members, you had, as you say, you had a core group, but to have somebody like Geezer there who has obviously delivered on the biggest stage as well, how important was that? Or maybe no more important than all the other leaders you had?
Very important. Neil Smith was the one person that everybody looked up to. Where Kieran McGeeney was in 1995, he was a young player. And he looked up to Neil Smith.
Mm-hmm.
But Neil Smith was one of the easiest men to manage. And he bought into all of this. Mm-hmm. And Like subsequent to that year, many of that team, and you mentioned there about the McDonnells and Geezer himself and that, went on to do other things and would be recognised as being very strong characters. There are other fellas that went off and did their own thing in life then after that, who were also very, very determined people. And from the goalkeeper out, there was a huge amount of determination, and they had the wherewithal, and the ambition was growing in them. And they were at that time probably the easiest group to manage, and certainly in my lifetime of managing football teams. Every single one of them bought into what we were doing. We were very good defensively, and we were good at identifying strengths of opposition. And we had men that could nullify the strengths of any opponents. And that, at the core of our group, was a huge part of us going so far.
Like whenever when Armagh won the O2 All Ireland, I think the first four men that marched behind the band were from your club. But you often hear the story that really good club teams, it's the sum of everybody else that's equally as important, and that's what you're saying. Like, did you say a wee while ago that all some sort of Armagh experience, and then obviously the experience of playing for the club as well? So it's fascinating to hear you say they were easy to manage, because like management's not an easy task. But the fact you're saying that says a lot about that group.
Unbelievable. But you see, the ask in terms of language, the ask appeared to be simple. It wasn't vague. There was specific requests made and specific coaching towards an end done. The hard bit was people having the right mindset to apply themselves to it. And given the disposition of so many of those players, and some of them carrying a huge pedigree through their families who would have represented Malaban back in 1964, the previous time that Malaban had won the championship, that made it easy. Now, we had a couple of wee things to try and distract people or get people away from any distractions. Number one, the players were never allowed to go and watch another opposition.
You told them not to?
No, I didn't. Yes, they were told not to.
Yeah.
They were forbidden to watch any other team. I didn't need 30 opinions when I stood up to give a team talk or devise a strategy. I needed one strategy, one approach, end of story. And the players trusted in that. Of course, you'll be ridiculed nowadays for not being collegiate and collaborate and discuss and negotiate and everything else. At that time, that was not an issue. Plus, there was other things that also helped us enormously, which you would not get away with today. We were doing video analysis in the early 90s. There was a man up the road here who used to have a wee company. He lived at Ballymascannon and he did weddings and such like. And we sent him to football matches. And the strange thing about it was, when we sent him to different venues to videotape football matches, oppositions would move aside and ask him, had he enough room? Was he all right? Was there anything that could get him? And he then went ahead, and it took a couple of weeks to get all the editing done and everything else before we presented it to the players. But we presented to the players video analysis of all the teams we were playing along route. And that was ahead of its time. And we had that, we were furnished with that information. The key people were identified and how, let's say, key people to making oppositions play were identified. Our players were allocated roles to deal with that, and the rest was history. And I can give you examples, multiple examples of that. Peter Duffy, who played for for Monaghan and Blayney, a wonderful player, very fast. Sean McDonnell looked after him. End of story. Neil Smith, middle of the field, Declan Lackman. End of story. And those are wonderful players. Don't get me wrong, absolutely wonderful. But that was their focus for that day. And we knew, like, sure, you know what, rightly, these fellas are sitting and they're dreaming at home what they're going to bring to the table, what they're going to make happen. But we knew what they were going to try and make happen. And we stopped it. And it's amazing when you can't get the run of yourself for a wee while, then frustration sets in. Now, there's a couple of other tactical things that we used at the time as well, weren't commonly practiced, but all of those things kept us on course, kept us focused, and we got across the line in our county final, and that, as I say, was a huge thing. And then in Ulster, we got across the line just by the length of time it took Pat McEnany to blow a whistle.
We'll come to that in a minute, but it's interesting the fact that none of the lads went to watch any opposition, and as you say, you wanted to keep your system simple, and then supposedly that was all geared towards making them focus on themselves. But we're 30 minutes into the recording, and we haven't mentioned was it the semi-final with Crossmolina? It was obviously all over YouTube at that stage, where it was rivals. There was a documentary made, but what was the build up to that game like? Was that more significant than any other game that year, or not?
Listen, Crossmolina are the standard bearers of Armagh football. I went to school in Crossmolina. I played football with wonderful fellas from Crossmolina. I managed great footballers from Crossmolina, and I have the highest regard for them. But at that time, the biggest match for us, with the exception of the county final, was Clonagale in the first round. Crossmolina happened to be the opposition in the next round. That documentary that you refer to, More Than a Game, that was sort of dropped on us. The county board, I believe, were approached and asked about, was there any fixtures coming up that were local derbies that would facilitate a documentary type program on the nature of rivalries, local rivalries in the GEA. And the instruction came from the county board. Now, we were very reluctant with this, and only did so because Crossmolina had agreed to it. And we thought to ourselves, well, if Crossmolina have agreed to this, then we'll agree to it, because we'll not be seen to be afraid of whatever challenge lays in front of us. Now, the documentary was made and goes into history. Parts of it may have been used for motivational reasons thereafter by Crossmolina. But the Crossmolina that we played in 1995 was a Crossmolina that hadn't won a championship in several years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Crossmolina team that had good players individually in it. It had some young players, and it had some older players who had served their club immensely well. But what happened in the 12 months after that was a complete transformation within Crossmolina, and there was a huge new body of players coming through, which we knew were there. They were just a wee bit young in 95. The McEntees played in that 95 game. I think I could be wrong.
They're still at school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in answer to your question about the significance of that, yes, it was wonderful. But to us, it was the older generation within the club would be saying, watch Crossmolina, you have to watch Crossmolina. And yes, you do, and you have to watch everybody else. But I'll take you right back to the beginning of this conversation. Time and time again, we were made favourites for one thing or another. And I forgot to mention, a huge thing with us when taking over was respect. And respect for anybody and everybody we were playing. And every team that we played got the same attention paid to them. No more what we were going through the door and expectation that things were just going to happen. The ball was in our court and we had to make them happen. And this nonsense coming in from outside, these noises external to the group, saying, oh, you'll win this, or you'll do that, or you'll do that, totally insignificant. But it's a difficult thing to fight against. So we had to be very, very vigilant. And Crossmolina coming along had the same respect afforded to them as everybody else. But in terms of that journey that we were on that year, at that time, that was just the next step for us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got away from that and further to it, then the next, and in fact, the semi-final that year, there were signs that some of the nonsense that had been talked, once you'd beaten Clans, once you'd beaten Cross, sure, it's just a matter of fact that it's going to happen. We were almost caught in the semi-final against St. Peter's. If it hadn't been for the brilliance of Patrick McGeaney, who scored an unbelievable goal out of nowhere to give us that wee bit of breathing space. So that raised its head again, and by God did that not give us plenty of ammunition to hit players within the change room and on the training field about letting other voices into their head, about letting other distractions take away from them. So
and is that the build up to the final you're talking about? Whenever I think the Harps played that here in the final.
Yes, we played the Harps, and of course, like we had a huge difficulty. I talked about the journey we were on. One of the big things for us was prior to 94, we couldn't get points out of Armagh. Didn't matter whether we were playing Pearse Oaks or Harps at home or away, they always had the upper hand on us. But we beat Harps the year before in the championship and went to a replay. But we were down players in our first match and we were down players in our second match. But nonetheless, Harps were a serious outfit. But we had a better scoring average than Harps. We hadn't conceded a goal in the championship. Harps had. Harps went into that game favourites. And funny, I was looking at the programme for that 95 final yesterday evening after speaking with you, just to have a glance at it. And I didn't realise how much of the county programme was devoted to Harps and all the wonderful stalwarts that they had from previous years. There's a bit at the back of the programme, you know, like we've turned up for a final.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's pen picks for us. But the consensus was Harps was going to win that. Now listen, they had Benny O'Kane, that the two Grimleys, the John Toner. They had wonderful footballers. But I think at that stage we realised we hadn't bad footballers ourselves either. But oddly enough, seeing that final, the one thing that we tried to avoid was the Grimleys because they were immense footballers. Immense. We had a big fella, Shane Collins, playing midfield for us along with Neil Smith. Justin McAnulty was no small player either for us. But I can recall midway in the second half when we were struggling and it was nip and tuck. When Blayney started kicking the ball straight out the middle as opposed to trying to avoid those men, here didn't we start to win it? We started to win that ball that was kicked straight down the lion's throat. And Shane Collins started to win a bit of ball for us and one ball into the square at the far end to get us a free kick, I think, at the end to put us ahead. But it was when we stopped avoiding what we were afraid of that we started producing. And that was psychologically for me a huge moment, a huge time in the development of that team.
What was the feeling like to win it?
Well, my son was born first on the 12th of July, and I wanted to just go to him and my wife, Teresa. But the abiding memory I have is of supporters and some men that I hadn't seen in a football match before, behind the wire, crying, and that encapsulates exactly what that meant to us. It was the unbelievable for so many had been achieved. We didn't win a senior championship having bedded in as a Division 1 team. We didn't win it as having established ourselves as a senior championship team. We won that championship as a junior side that travelled from Division 4. And that's the enormity of it.
Peter, you talked about the fact that the Harps were favourites. Were they favourites with everybody, or was that just a bookie thing, or was it a 50-50 game?
Well, you see, there was, when you look through there, don't get me wrong, I said about respect, and respect was a huge part of everything that we did. But the county chairman's had a son that was playing with Harps. Young Nugent, who unfortunately passed away. Joe McManus, who was the scribe for all things to do with Armagh football for multiple years, prepared the programme. And I was looking there, there's interviews with Jack Bratton, huge character in Armagh football. I suppose Brother Ennis, huge amount of time, Dingle Daly, Sean Devlin. These are household names all through our county. And yes, it's appropriate to recognise these people and their contribution to their clubs and all of that. And Harps has a wonderful history and all of that. But you see, everything and anything that you can use to reinforce the message that you are giving out to your group. And a big part of that was, nobody gives us a chance. And I have to say at the end of the thing, if you spoke with any of the teams that played us right through that whole championship, the vast majority of them would have been expected to beat us. The whole way through. I've had the luxury and the times since to have spoken to many of the managers and players of the oppositions. Like Eamon McInerney, for example, would have said to me that the message he got out of our own county was, should there only an intermediate side? You know, lovely.
What were the celebrations like? Or did you push pause and say, we're going to win for Ulster? Or how do you find that balance? Because you have to enjoy it. You have to try and win Ulster. How long was the gap? What do you sort of recall of that?
Well,
It's significant.
Running parallel with our team and dovetailing into what I said to you earlier about trying to make our place the one place where the players all wanted to be, we had to have other things running parallel with our hard training on the pitch and off it. And every 6 weeks, we went on a tour. We went and we trained somewhere different. And there was only a couple of requirements. A change of clothes and a few pounds in your pocket. And we went and we had the same experiences that lads would be getting with their college teams. We would go, train hard, organise for sandwiches somewhere along the way, and have a few drinks and a sing-song on our bus. Occurrences which would be frequently referred to in any encounters I would have with those players to this day, about the wonderful time they had. I'm going to mention a man called Patsy Quinn, who volunteered to drive the bus for us because Patsy enjoyed the crack. And we did that about every 6 weeks. So when we got and we won the county final, huge thing for us. We were in the Carrickdale and the speeches and all the speechifying was finished. I asked Noel McParland our club treasurer to see if he could organise a room for us, just for 10 minutes. And we got 10 minutes in a different room in the Carrickdale, away from everybody.
Just the squad and yourselves?
Yes, just the squad themselves, nobody else. And there was, of course, any time after the championship match, there's a wonderful pub in Forkhill called Larkin's that everybody would love to go to. And I had already heard we'd hit Larkin's at 11 o'clock the next morning and blah, blah, blah. Got them into a room in the Carrickdale and said, listen, that was wonderful. Enjoy tonight. But I want to ask you something. Is this it? Is this what you want? Is this what you've trained for? Or is there more? And I went on and I said, listen, there's these many amount of matches. These are the players we have. And this is the competition now where we're certainly not given a hope in hell. Let's embrace it and meet it. Enjoy the night. And we will do Larkin's tomorrow. But I would ask you to wait for me. And I'm not available till about 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. And they agreed. And we went up to Larkin's at 7 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple of hours in Larkin's, and that was great. And my recollection of Tuesday night was it was tough.
Training?
Yes. And that was done and dusted, heads down, let's go for this. And the thing about Ulster then was, it was the time to express ourselves, to be the footballers and the football team that we had dreamt of being. And it was a different experience.
Was it Blayney first or Cargan first?
Cargan first.
Uh-huh.
And a huge stepping stone for us in many ways. We actually played the best football of our championship year to date at that time. And we're coasting. And then we stopped coasting. And I think Cargan maybe got 2 goals or so. I think we ended up winning by 4. Those are the first goals we conceded in the championship.
That's right, you were saying that.
And I'm standing there and we're looking at something and we're looking at fellas who all of a sudden got carried away and lost focus of what it was we were to be at. Huge learning experience. We were gifted that experience because that experience didn't happen after that. You know, the mindset was we could nail that down again. But again, it's just another example of how something can intrude into what your plan is, can take away from your performance, can dilute what it is that you said that you were going to do. And it was a huge learning experience for us. Now, I want to stress that, like anybody from Cargan, we went and we watched Cargan. We watched the Antrim Championship. We had every newspaper cutting that there was of Cargan for that whole year. Their names were up on our wall. Who did what, when and where was up on our wall. And they were afforded every respect.
You went on to play Blayney, who were told that you were an intermediate team, but you went on facing Blayney knowing that like Castle Blayney had a considerable tradition in Monaghan at that stage. So what was the focus going into that game?
Well,
and I suppose you've the sort of South Armagh, Monaghan, you know, you probably know each other quite well in those wee circles as well.
Well, not so much now for us. Yes, Crossmolina, their catchment runs right to the border. Cullyhanna, yes, their catchment runs right to the Blayney border there. Not so much us. But Barney McLean, the PE teacher in St Mark's in Warren Point at the time and manager of Castlewellan, him and I had long conversations about his encounter with Blayney. And Nudie Hughes was very important to Blayney. And they were doing different things. But listen, they had people they needed to win the ball for kickouts. and they had places they wanted to put that ball. And they started movement which was different from anything we had encountered. But the bottom line was we knew where the ball was going. We mightn't have known where all the players were going because they mixed the whole thing up, which was unusual at that time. So we played a fella called Colin McParland, a tremendous footballer, capable of playing any position on the field. And we lined him out at corner forward, and I told him to stand right in the middle of our defence, between the centre half back, Kieran McGeaney, and our full back, because we didn't know where our full back would end up, or our corner backs, we didn't know where McGeaney would end up, but we knew that's where the ball was going to be going. Mm-hmm. So we played with a sweeper in that deep in our defence. And Blayney couldn't get round it. Couldn't get round it. And Eamon McEnany's admission afterwards that he hadn't come across that before. But ironically and strangely enough, the times that we were in, coming off the field, or even before we got off the field, our own spectators were shouting at Colin, "Get up the field and play where you're supposed to be playing." Mm-hmm. Because he had 15 on his back. And I just, stay. And after the game, the amount of people who would have said to me, you know, God, they played well, they played a terror, they were just wonderful, except for Colin McParland, who didn't know where he was. And Colin McParland was the man that put an end to the Blayney threat going forward. And for Colin to do that and to not listen to that other stuff, it's just an example how much the players bought into doing or following the strategy that we had. But that was critical to our performance. But I said before, Sean McDonnell, Martin, Peter Duffy, Jared Larkin, Mark and Nudie Hughes, Cody Burns at the heart of our defence was a huge player for us right through the championship. Huge man. All of those fellas, their contribution was magnificent. Now, I wouldn't stand here and say at any time, we didn't always have the most skillful footballers in the world, but by God, we had men that would just stick to a task. And that's, as I said, I think we managed Blayney's key men, and we managed their strategy, and the rest is history.
He's won the Ulster final. Baileyborough from Cavan. I was doing an article with them earlier on in the year, and they still go back to the late decision and all of that. But you touched on it yourself. But going into that final, where were you mentally? Because I suppose you've come off the back of beating Blayney, and I'm going back to the St. Peter's game where you were in and were nearly caught. How did you approach Baileyborough?
I have to say, Baileyborough got every ounce of respect we had to give.
You seem to approach every team the same. You had your homework done and all the rest.
Well, see, Baileyborough gifted us more opportunity in that Ulster campaign than anybody else did in terms of giving us the chance to see them. They played Ballinderry
twice,
and we got to see them twice, and we got to see all of the twists and turns that they had to make to get over Ballinderry. Ballinderry were heavily tipped for that game. Is it Collie Bale was their full forward? Maybe I've got the first name wrong, but I remember the headline news was "For whom the bell tolls," because he scored, I think, maybe the last.
Raymond Bell, he scored against Errigal, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
For whom the bell tolls. And we were going there, I suppose, initially thinking, what Ballinderry were like. But there was a few people there playing for that Baileyborough side who I was immensely impressed with, and not least the influence of Aidan Connolly. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at different reports on one thing or another, but for us, Aidan Connolly was the man that made everything tick. Too much ball went through his hands, more so than the vast majority of players. Now, listen, there was wonderful players. You had Lamb there. You had a young lad called Ray Brennan, All right, Brennan. But listen, there was a number of things assisted us in going forward and in dealing with that game. Right, haven't seen them twice. Getting our timing right to get into Clonus. We had done a couple of dummy runs. We had got on Clonus beforehand. We had it down to a 5-minute thing. We different routes to get to Clonus. Do we go via Monaghan? Do we go by Ballybay? Do we go anywhere else? We decided to go by Ballybay. Got our timing right pre-match meal in Ballybay. A lot of the players couldn't eat. Remember Raymond Quinn, our tough cornerback, puking his guts out before he could get back on the bus. Couldn't suppress the nerves. Just bear with me 1 second, Michael. So listen, Michael, there was a few of them very sick things that we would have laughed at later on. But we went and we got on to Clonus and we did our warm-up. We had everything done, timed to perfection. And when we were going back into the changing room to put on our jerseys, Balyborough were just arriving. They got caught in traffic. And they weren't there in time. And where we saw that, this has to be an upset for them. The match started and we were like a whirlwind. And we just totally overran them. Second half, we came back and pressed us severely. We had a number of opportunities. Had we not used the ball better, we could have blasted them out of sight because they committed going forward. They gave us huge spaces and we didn't take advantage of that. But as I said earlier on, we got across the line in a guttery Clonus on a wet December day. And after that whistle went, I didn't care whether it was 1 point or 10 points, nor did anyone belong to us or anyone who played there. We got there. And that was getting to somewhere that very few people believe we would ever get. Ferdy McDonnell in his speech from the stand said, reporters were ringing during the weeks asking, where are we? Where are we located? Where is Malaban? And he said, I'm lifting the cup. You know where Malaban is now.
And I noticed you said that you're obviously fanatical about football, but you went to Ulster finals, you went to Ulster club football, and maybe a bit of you thinking, imagine that was us. So from your point of view, you were getting that across to the group how important this competition was. Like, and one stage you did say we're going to win Ulster whenever you hadn't got out of Armagh. So it must have been glorious to be standing there with that cup and going home as Ulster champions.
It was. It's not something you can prepare yourself for. You can prepare for a match. You can prepare for a performance. You can prepare for set pieces. You can use all the psychology of the day, which we would have used as well. That's another story. But I don't think we certainly didn't prepare for it all working, it all coming together, because you are enveloped by an emotion that you can't hold on to. You can't make head nor tail of it. Like, people didn't know whether to jump up and down, or to fall down, or to walk away. It was such a intrusion into the lives of people in our community that they had never really expected. So many people go to these occasions and these matches with the expectation, as long as we do all right. Like, some voices in our own club would have said, maybe it would have been better if Blayney had we had to lose the first round of Ulster rather than Blayney give us an awful hiding and set them boys back years. Nonsense. You only get one bite at this here and you go for it. You go for it. and they went for it. But the aftermath of that was unbelievable. I have to say, in our club rooms that night, there were people there from clubs all over the county. There were people there from Tyrone. There were people there from Louth. But I want to say what is a very important thing in all of this here. Again, there's a number of things I've forgotten to mention. We were going into the dark and we didn't know if we were doing the right thing or the wrong thing. We had 2 lights at the corner of our football pitch. And we trained in that corner all the time in the gutters. And it was grid work and we battered the heads of each other. And that was all we had. Silverbridge came to our assistance. And Silverbridge offered us their field, our new field with brand new floodlights, a place to train. And Donald Welsh was instrumental in making that happen. And there was a groundsman, another Barney, who opened the place for us every night and was courteous of one thing or another. That helped us immeasurably. So too did the assistance we got from Ray Morgan and Tommy McGovern from Burren. I asked Tommy McGovern, could he come out, because Noel McParland, a hugely influential man on our committee, and incidentally, our committee at that time was 100% behind us, led by Pete McCreish and Tony McParland's father, Noel, made so much happen for us and made life so much easier for us. But Noel organised for Tommy McGovern to come up to us and watch our training. And we only wanted the answer to one question. Are we doing this right? And all we were doing was those kicking drills, fisting drills, kicking drills. And Tommy McGovern said, yes, that's what we did. Mm-hmm. Then we got Ray Morgan to come up and do the same, him and Tommy again. And Ray said, change nothing. Because it was all based on getting the handling and the skills up to a level, up to a pitch that would allow you to play as a team.
Mm. Was this during Ulster? Was this?
Yes, during Ulster. Ulster.
They had walked the Ulster path themselves, obviously.
Ray Morgan won 3 Ulsters. Was it 3 All-Irelands he won with Burren? But that was a very, very affirming experience. To have Ray Morgan and Tommy McGovern say, no, that's perfect. Just keep doing that. And as I said, this was a shot in the dark. So we didn't know what we were at, Michael.
Mm-hmm. And I'm conscious we've been well over our time, but it's an amazing story and it's worth telling properly. But you went to London and then you had an All-Ireland. Is there the regret that you didn't go further? Or I'm sure there is, or maybe there's not. Maybe you were, you've sort of accepted it or not, or because like you said, a real core of players there that had played at a very high level. So I'm guessing you felt one was there for you.
Absolutely. The London experience was a huge thing for our whole community because people travelled en masse to that event. The circumstances of that game and the shenanigans that went on over in London to try and distract us was, let's say, memorable. Getting over that will remain, going to that London thing is huge in the psyche of young and old within our parish. The Éire Óg experience is extremely disappointing. And there was huge weather factors on that day. Huge wind, huge amount of rain. And then it changed. We spent the first half playing into it. And what we got to play with in the second half was a lot less of an advantage than what Éire Óg had in the first. But yes, a huge regret. A huge regret. And to see Éire Óg go on and being beaten in the All-Ireland final by Lorne Rangers made it even more disappointing. But It is what it is. And the journey, as I said to you previously, wasn't from the first round of the senior championship. The journey began in the first round of the junior championship. It started in Division 4.
We've been speaking for over an hour now, and it's probably a difficult enough question, but just to sum up, is there any standout memory from the whole couple of years above the rest, or something that you really take away from that group of men, or that, you know, the camp that you had that will always be with you? It's probably a tough enough question because there's, you know, it meant a lot to you, the whole campaign.
Sure, it's a tough question, but I don't think I have to think too long about this. Whenever I was a lad, and I was sprinting for St. Joseph's High School in Crossmolina, and I was doing a wee bit of training in Newry Shamrocks, and I won Ulster schools and then went to the All-Irelands and was fortunate enough to win there and then do that for several years. I'd met a teacher in the corridor one day in St. Joseph's High School, Mrs. Bridgie McMahon, a great, great teacher, a woman who loved Crossmolina and loved being fit to do things for students. And she said to me, you know something, Peter, you'll have those medals in a box somewhere for years to come. But she said, you know what you've given to us? She said, you have given us a glimpse of what it's like to believe. Crossmolina, South Armagh at that time was heavily militarised. Mm-hmm. All of the media surrounding our locality was negative. It almost created the sense that you were almost subhuman. And her point to me was, you have shown people that they can go shoulder to shoulder with anybody outside of here and be as good as them. And she said, if we can get everybody in this school believing that they can achieve, anything is possible. So in answer to your question, what do I glean from that more than anything else? If nothing else, if I take nothing else from this, other than the thought that I somehow helped people to believe that they can go toe to toe and achieve things, then I'm satisfied.
Fantastic, Peter. Thanks so much for your time and your memories, and it's so fitting that it's a story told in the middle of our club championship season, because as we often hear, when the county season's gone, some people think the GA ends, but at this time of the year, the club season's only really getting started, and there'll be another story written somewhere this year somewhere, and that's the Malaban one. You'll gather this year, you'll celebrate, you'll tell all the stories. So thank you very much, Peter. And for our listeners, you can tune back in on Monday, where we will be talking over all the big championship stories of the weekend to see where the start of the club season is going to move on to.